Hello and welcome to Dark Side of the Mic. Today I have in front of me the Electronics V7x, and I thought it would be interesting to compare this microphone to the V7 model that I've had for a while. They're both super cardioid dynamic mics that I think offer quite a compelling choice for spoken word applications, particularly podcasting. So in this recording, I'm going directly into my Antelope Audio Zen Go via my Golden Age Project's Pre-73 preamp, kind of Rupert Neve style preamp. So I'll switch back and forth between both of the mics so you get a flavour of the differences, and we'll do some comparisons with other mics as well. All the audio you'll hear will be completely unprocessed. I'll just normalise it to -23 LUFS. So starting with the V7 then, I'll say at the outset, I think this is one of the best dynamic mics you can buy, not just on a budget, but for any budget. After a certain point, I think it becomes a subjective choice on your preferences and the sound you're going for. But in terms of the basic fundamentals of a good dynamic sound, I think there's a lot to admire here. And don't start hyperventilating, but I think this mic completely wipes the floor with the pod mic from Rode in terms of sound quality. And if you can get over the fact that it's a handheld dynamic and not a yoke broadcast mount dynamic, you should really be buying this every time. So looking at both of these Electronics mics then, let's go through why I think that is. First of all, both mics offer a superior extended frequency range. The V7 goes from 40Hz to 19 kHz, while the V7X goes that little bit further, starting at 30Hz to 19 kHz. Now, to put that into some kind of perspective, most dynamics, even high-end ones, tend to fall off much earlier than that. So these two mics are getting fairly close to condenser-like performance, particularly in the high end, thanks to their aluminum voice coils, or aluminium voice coils, and the neodymium magnets. Now, there might be some of you out there who are saying that, well, my mic goes from 20Hz to 20 kHz. Does it really though? Have a look at the frequency response. If the lines fall off a cliff at 13 kHz, then I'm afraid it doesn't go to 20 kHz. So that's something to be aware of when you're looking at the specs for microphones. And if you look at the specs for these Electronics mics, the frequency response does back up the advertised frequency range on the spec sheet. Secondly, and I think this is the most important reason, both the V7s offer a really smooth frequency response curve, and we'll go into the difference between them in a second. But why is this important? Well, put simply, a smoother curve is likely to work much better on a range of voices since no particular frequency is overemphasized, overboosted. This is fairly important for controlling things like sibilance or any harsh sounds that you may find across a range of different voices. Sibilance doesn't just appear at a single frequency point on all voices, it generally resides in a fairly broad range, and of course that's different too in male or female voices. So in my voice, for example, I generally find I need to cut about 4 to 5 kHz to control those S sounds, but on someone else it might be different. If I come across a frequency response with fairly harsh mountain peaks or sharp dips, alarm bells just start to ring for me. You can be fairly sure that in some, maybe a lot of voices, that kind of response will overboost unwanted frequencies, and as a result it might sound quite harsh or sizzly, particularly in the high end. So how are the V7s different from each other? For me, there are two key differences in the frequency response. Firstly, the V7X has a more broad mid-forward presence boost or curve, while the V7 has a smooth dip at about 7 kHz, and I think that's designed to control sibilance, particularly in singers, but generally it just kind of takes the edge off there. In terms of spoken word though, I don't really feel the difference in the high end is too significant. It might be slightly more punchier on the V7X, but both mics sound equally and wonderfully smooth in the high end. What I do hear though is that the V7X does have significantly more low end, especially as you get close to it with the proximity effect. And I hope you've been able to hear that as we've switched back and forth between the two. Now, a critical consideration here is that the V7X is primarily designed as an instrument mic. It doesn't have anywhere near the plosive protection that the V7 offers. There's an excellent video by Anton Browne on YouTube, a link in the description down below, where he covers different approaches to using the V7X, I think mainly from a singing perspective, but you'll get the idea. For spoken word, you need to use a pop filter, and I don't think a foam windscreen will really cut it on its own. But in a podcast situation where you can set that up in a static position, you're not moving about, I don't think that's a huge deal breaker. So how do these two mics compare to some other dynamic mics? Let's do some quick comparisons with a quote from Jimmy Reid's inaugural address as the rector of the University of Glasgow in 1972. For those of you that are interested, the transcript was reprinted in full by the New York Times afterwards, which described it as the greatest speech since President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So do check it out if you can. Its relevance nearly 50 years later is really quite incredible. So we'll start on the V7 then. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. And now we're back on the V7x. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. And now we've moved on to the Rode Procaster. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. And now we've moved on to the DSB1, a kind of homemade dynamic mic. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. And now we've moved over to the Shure SM7B. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. And now we've moved over onto the Beyerdynamic M201 TG. A rat race is for rats. We're not rats. We're human beings. Reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that's happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardize your chances of promotion and self-advancement. To finish then, we've moved back over to the V7X for some final thoughts. I think both of these mics offer a really nice alternative from each other. The V7 for me is much more neutral and transparent in my opinion, much less coloured if you like, while the V7X could be described almost as being more V-shaped, more girth in the low end and a little bit more punch up top as well. So it really depends on the sound you're going for. You need to be able to deal with the plosives on the V7X, and even using a pop filter you still need to be careful. I'm pretty sure, in fact I know a few have creeped through in this recording today, so that's something you need to bear in mind. But when you consider you can get both of these mics for less than the cost of one Rode Procaster, which sounds to me pretty much identical if not very close in between the two in terms of sound signature, I think that makes these two mics an incredible bargain. Okay, so that about wraps it up today, and don't worry, you don't have to throw your pod mics into the bin. If you're happy with them, then that's fantastic. Otherwise, they'll make excellent doorstops. Take care, and we'll see you next time.